Welcome to the Hazard Class Podcast. This is the podcast where I get to ask my stupid questions to some of the smartest people in and around the world of emergency response. My guest this week is the editor-in-chief of CBRNE World Magazine. He's been an author and a journalist inside of this space for the better part of 20 plus years. He's been at the helm of this magazine for the last 10. For those of you listening, only listening, don't be confused. I'm not talking to a Peppa Pig character. I'm talking to my buddy, Mr. Gwyn Winfield. Let's get into it. Welcome to the show, Gwyn. I'm very happy to have you.
Jake.
Very good. Yeah. So we're talking to Gwyn from across the pond. If you can't tell, like he just said, when you couldn't hear him, he made his own joke. He said, not only does he sound like Peppa Pig, he might look like him too. But I tell you what, if any one of you has the opportunity to spend any time with this guy, he is a riot. He's one of my favorite people to be around. So Gwyn, thank you so much for having the show. As the way the show goes, we open the show up with our Wheel of Stupid Questions as a reminder to say asking questions is good. Even if they're stupid, if you point them at the right people, you can have some pretty good answers. So let's jump into it.
Let's do it.
Spin that wheel of stupid questions.
Okay, let's hit the wheel. We have a real wheel and it is spinning. This is a great one because you're going to throw back to Mr. Bobby Salvesen from episode 1. Is a hot dog a sandwich?
I listened to Bobby's sort of views on this, and I don't think he went sort of far enough. Of course, it's a sandwich. It has to be a sandwich. It's a hot meat sandwich, which sounds like an exciting position to be in sexually. But anyway, aside from that, I mean, fundamentally, if you get any bread bun and you sort of cut through it and you put something inside it, it's a sandwich. It doesn't matter whether it's cut all the way through, and it's the same no matter what sort of shape the bun is, whether it's hot dog bun shaped or it's a bap or a bomb or any of the hundreds of other words that we have in the UK for basically a bread roll. Sandwich, 100% of the time, no matter what you put in it.
So you're saying if bread is involved with any sort of topping, we have ourselves a sandwich?
Fundamentally, I mean, there are all kinds of fundamentals that are going to decide, they're going to try and provide us with rules that we have to follow. But I mean, this is the 21st century. I mean, I saw a hot dog the other day that sort of came in the middle of a pizza, a small pizza, looked like sort of a taco. Now that I think is where you really confuse the whole issue. So if you put a hot dog in a pizza shell, is it a taco or is it a pizza or does it remain a hot dog? We're getting a little bit off. If it's bread and it's got a filling, it's a sandwich.
So I'm going to go one layer farther. If we're going to dive into this, let's do it. So if bread filled with anything is a sandwich, what's a calzone then? Is that, do you guys have
dough? That's dough. So it's not bread.
It's very similar.
It is similar. It is similar, and then you have you don't get them so much in the States, but then you have pasties, which I know you can get up in Massachusetts, for example, which is fundamentally filling between pastry. So I think they are sort of sandwich adjacent, but fundamentally, if it's bread with a filling, whether it's jelly or whether it's cheese or anything savory, it's a sandwich. Once you start doing dough, once you start doing pastry, it becomes something else.
Oh, okay. You heard it here. I love it. I love the take. All right. So let's get into the real deal. How does a man get involved in CBRNE or CBRNE like this? What leads a person to dedicate their life to covering this kind of topic?
Stupidity, I suppose, is a sort of the quick answer to that. So I started off way back in 1997 as a defense journalist. So I covered pretty much anything and everything from main battle tanks through to fast jets, sort of frigates, whatever it may well be. And there's that whole sort of that whole curve where you sort of start off thinking that it's going to take you no time at all to be able to learn everything about that. So I read Ken Albeck's book Biohazard Roundabout in 2001. I thought, oh, what a fascinating subject! I can't wait to be an expert on this in about 6 months' time. And then sort of somewhere now along perhaps the bottom of that Dunning-Kruger curve, I'm kind of the other side, realizing how little I know, but thankful that I know a lot of very smart people that I can ask the sort of the questions to, like yourself, and get answers.
So how early did the journalism things go? Is that a childhood dream, or what? Where does journalism start?
I think if there were true depictions of journalism on TV rather than sort of Sex in the City, where apparently you just smash out like 300 words between sort of prosecco, there'd be far fewer kids wanting to do it. So I mean, I basically left university with a need to pay bills and ended up working for a publisher because they had jobs. There was a high turnover, and that's kind of how it went for me. I sort of managed to find myself in defense because I was a very boring child and enjoyed reading about military history. The kind that can sort of clear the room at a sort of a party. Wait, come back! I have so much to tell you about Bismarck.
Yeah. The irony of that is that now you command every room that you're in. I think that you've conquered that. I think.
Largely through force of smell. Being this aromatic, it's very hard for people to concentrate. So I'm used to my own stench. So it's quite easy for me to do it.
So, coming from a non-military background, did you find resistance getting into this career field? Like, does that make sense?
Yes, yeah, absolutely. And I think that it's certainly difficult in CBRN and hazmat possibly to a lesser degree, is that there are so many gatekeepers on what you can and can't know, both for sort of classification and also because being the steward of that information gives you power. So you spend your whole time knocking on doors and then finding that they don't want to tell you something because you're not X or not Y. And at the start, it gets sort of a bit difficult, and you start to sort of worry that maybe this isn't for me. But eventually, you do it long enough, and there's a lot of people who are out there who are very generous with their time and their knowledge, and they will tell you these things. And then eventually, you go, do you know what? I know enough people that I can ask that it doesn't matter. And B, when I look at all of these gatekeepers, I realize that the whole system is set up to not let anybody through. Everybody loves having that sort of monopoly on information, and as such, it's designed to be able to exclude people. If you're from the wrong regiment, if you're from the wrong school, because we've still got a class-based system in the UK, there's reasons why people won't tell you something. So eventually, after you know enough people, you just arc around that and you find the answer from somebody else.
How have you seen the landscape shift in CBRNE in the last 20 years now?
Yeah, so it started off being very much a military sort of field that you go back to sort of 2001, and it's where that sort of big bow wave of money comes in after Amerithrax, around about sort of 2003 to 2008. That there was this realization that despite Shinrikyo, that there needed to be a major investment in this, if nothing else, because of the sort of the post-Cold War military forces were being drawn down and they weren't always going to be there. So I say when we first started, it was military all the way, and then it got a little bit more civilian, and then finally, I'd say up until about sort of 3 or 4 years ago, US outside it was still very much now dominated by civilian forces. If you wanted to look at people who were doing interesting things, it was either hazmat crews or it was potentially sort of tactical or law enforcement officers, because they had shorter sort of experimentation times. They had a very real threat that they were having sort of the opportunity to solve either with or without money. So the civilian forces were always coming up with interesting things to be able to solve their day-to-day problems. But now, after the Putin's invasion in the Ukraine, the military is realizing that they now need to be able to update doctrine. They need to be able to move away from this terrorist concept that they had, this worry about adversaries with small amounts of possibly toxic industrial chemical agent or something that they've knocked together in their kitchen, back to that whole concept which civilian forces have never or usually don't have to deal with, which is gallons and gallons of chemical and biological warfare agents and potentially nukes. So we now see a complete return to where it was when I started over 20 years ago, of the military starting to get primacy. But again, these things can shift yet again. If we see peace break out all over the world, then maybe again sort of hazmat forces will take primacy in the sort of thinking about these things.
So obviously you are, traveling the world, you're interacting with people from all across the world. How does the viewpoint for this topic shift around the world? Is there a big difference between, how someone in Europe versus South America versus North America is viewing this, or is it pretty much universal across the world?
Yeah, I'd say at the moment, certainly in Europe, it depends on your proximity to Russia. And if you're in Southeast Asia, it depends on your proximity to China. So you look at somebody, and I've got friends in both forces, you look at somebody from Poland and the level of threat that they're facing, and then you look at somebody in Portugal and the level of threat that they're looking at. There's an entirely different view of the capability that they need to build, the sorts of threats, the scale of the threats. So Poland's now stepped up a sort of a whole series of mobile labs. They're now looking at mine-protected vehicles for fire and hazmat crews, because they know that even if it's not sort of full intensity sort of conflict, it may well be that there are some Russian shells that have gone over that they may well need to respond to an incident that is in an explosively non-permissive environment. So they need to be able to have vehicles that are going to protect their crews when they go in there. And you look at sort of Portugal, which is a very long way from that border, and they're not considering anything like that. So there's depending on this threat from state actors and state actors' proxies, depends on how much effort, money, sort of time and thought goes into their sort of ability to defeat it.
Do you feel a burden as, someone working in journalism in this space to try to take the lessons learned from the places that are more active and spread them to the places that are less active? Because obviously we never know where the next actual attack may happen. And to be able to, proliferate the good information we're getting from the front lines and put them to places, that are less active. Is that a thing that's conscious in your mind when you're trying to, find articles and push this information back out to kind of the community at large?
I think that the thing that always sort of gets me is the realization that there is no, certainly within CBRN and to a lesser extent in hazmat as well, there is no template case. That CBRN devices or chemical and biological devices are usually chosen by people whose cognitive process is slightly different than everybody else. So they've decided that they don't want to, stab their bank manager or to try and run him down, but they want to create a death ray, and this is how they're going to do it. So that when you sort of look at these various cases, it's often very difficult to be able to get one sort of set of lessons learned that you can sort of provide to someone and go, yep, there it is. That's all you need to learn about sort of doing this. So I think with the exception of almost a sort of a bedrock foundation of keep yourself alert, keep yourself thinking, and train in the basics, that once you move on from that, it's very idiosyncratic in terms of the type of threats that you see and the kind of sort of resolution that you want. So in Africa, for example, the adding of organophosphates to wedding beer is a common thing, that you might well end up with 20 or 30 dead either, and we never really know what the causes of it are, but turning up at a funeral at a wedding where everyone's now planning for the funeral of 20 or 30 people isn't an unusual thing. But if in Europe or North America, we'd all suddenly wonder what the hell happened, and this would be something that would make the news all the time. So there's local threats and local solutions, and there are some threats that are cross-cutting. But again, you can only manage it with the tools that you've got. And we've all found, whether we're with the UK dealing with the Skripals or the US dealing with the Merithrax, that when it happens, very rarely do we have the right tools on hand all the time. So it's those sort of that basic training, that training is going to keep you and then the people around you safe is the most vital thing.
So as you're kind of plugged into this community on a global perspective, what's your thoughts on, the mounting concern of, World War III coming down through the world of, Russia and China and, all these things that are kind of not looking so hot, at least from this side of the world. I know you're a little bit closer, so it probably feels even a little warmer, but what do you feel?
I feel like the script writers have outdone themselves. I mean, we had 2022 when we were all focused on Russia and China's sort of bubbling away in the background, and then suddenly, wham, out of nowhere, Syria. That was good work. We were all sort of, looking at what was happening between Israel and Iran, and a new fighter has entered combat. Yeah. And now we look at the geopolitical massive tidal changes that are going to happen in the region because of, I would suggest, an expected collapse of the sort of the Syrian HTS regime. I think it's going to be very difficult for them to be able to keep together the whole country, and there are some very big players on the borders that will seek to help and to choose proxies, and the destabilization of what used to be called Mesopotamia, I think, is going to have impacts outside it. And bearing in mind that this is a country that had acknowledged chemical weapons, was expected to have biological weapons, and not all of those will have been destroyed. So proliferation across that in the Middle East and Europe, maybe, but I mean, could we see the use of it in Syria by one group against another group? I think that's quite likely. Wow.
What is the temperature in Europe now for this whole situation? Obviously, being in America, it's it feels really distant. Obviously, we're very aware of it, but it feels very distant. Is this a thing that's ever present in the minds of Europeans as proximity, or not really?
I'd say not really. I mean, again, obviously we're approaching the Christmas season here, so everybody's thinking about sort of far more pleasant things. But I mean, we're seeing a sort of a large sort of potential sort of, again, wave movement of some refugees that were previously refugees moving back from Europe back into Syria. And then there's the potential of prison camps that had some of the most unpleasant people in the region that might now be overrun and released. And we might well see a wave of individuals trying to get back to Europe. So again, if you were part of the security forces in any part of Europe, you'd be having a very different sort of festive season than the rest of us that are kind of worried about where I'm going to get my turkey from.
So let's go back a little bit more to your story. So how do you make the jump from being a contributing writer in this kind of field to now being at the helm of this magazine?
So I started writing on NBC or CBRN around about 2001, and then in 2003, the company that I was working for got bought by another publisher. So we then launched in 2003 another magazine called NBC International. So I was still doing defense stuff, but largely writing on NBC CBRN. And then realized about sort of 2 years in that basically I was writing everything and my colleague David Levitt was selling everything. And we just thought we don't actually need anybody else to do this. We obviously need somebody to print it, and we need some admin and sort of financial support. But fundamentally, we're kind of doing all of the heavy lifting on this. So we tried to buy it off its owner, and we thought at first that was going to be successful. But then he did the whole Charlton Heston, you can prize it out of my cold dead hands. So we had to be able to part ways. So we parted ways and very quickly set up CBRNE World. So we set that up in 2006 and haven't looked back. I mean, we launched again in well, maybe 2012, hazmat responder. So we did that for about a couple of years, just focused on the hazmat response market. I loved writing it. I think people enjoyed reading it, but financially there just wasn't the same sort of budgets there to be able to sustain it as there was for CBRNE World. So we keep looking at the sector to see whether there's oxygen to release another sort of magazine, but it's very tough at the moment. Magazine publishing is a bit like vinyl. There's some people out there that sort of love it and respect it, but there's other people who just want their Spotify's and YouTube's and entirely disposable music / publications.
So for those not familiar with the magazine, can you give me like the 10,000 foot view of it, what it offers? Obviously, I've seen it and it's awesome, but give us the rundown of what it is, how often it's released, things like that.
So it comes out every other month. It's both print and online. And I always say that the only person other than the staff in the office that read it is my mum. So it's sort of designed for people with an interest in chemical, biological, radiological, nuclear defense. But that will cover everything from science. So looking at things like metal organic frameworks that are the kind of the coming thing for protective suits. All the way through to case studies, write-ups of what's been going on in the CBRNE world, and interviews with people who are sort of leading thought meisters on it. So it's a sort of a pick and mix of sort of various stories. And obviously we're driven by events as well. So when we were seeing a lot more chemical attacks in Syria, we were writing a lot more about chemical attacks in Syria. So it does tend to be a bit scattergun, but then it can also, due to a sudden increase in cases, again, whether that's COVID or biological or chemical or sort of radiological, then we'll focus on that. We're writing more on nuclear policy and strategy now than we have done in the past 20 years, frankly, because that's again going to be one of those coming things. So it tends to be a little bit of something for everybody. It's pretty much the coffee table book for CBRN people. But we sort of also look at what's happening in the world.
So one thing that I have specific questions about is your covers are always amazing. What's the origin story of like how you chose that art direction, and like obviously they're very cool, super iconic. There's got to be a lot of thought process behind that.
I'd say it's probably too much cheese before bedtime that drives a lot of it. So when you've sort of written on the same topic for, again, I'd say probably 5 or 6 years, it got very, very dull to try and do something exciting with somebody in PPE on the cover. It was always sort of like, oh yeah, this looks a lot like the one we did 2 years or 2 months ago. So we started using sort of illustrations far less regularly than we do now. So maybe one a year or sort of 2 a year. And then as sort of time went on and we got such great support from doing it, we now probably out of 6 issues, we probably only do 2 with a photo on, and then everything else will be illustration of one variety or another. So as a sort of a good part of the job, I get to go to various sort of Comic-Cons, either where I'm traveling or in the UK, and sort of go up and down Artists Alley and sort of stare at all the sort of the incredibly creative people there, and look to see if they either have a style that we can utilize, or they have a sort of a good idea for something what I would call vanilla, but something vanilla. I go, great, we can do a CBRN version of that. Mm-hmm. So it sort of comes from talking to them. We're still very much an in-person office as opposed to all the hybrid working. So sitting down with a beer and sort of chatting about this, that, and the other, and what we can sort of what we can use and sort of bend to our will and our sector is kind of our jam. It's just what interests us.
And I love it. It looks great. It's sweet. Not a lot of people in the hazmat space are like, without diminishing anyone else, there's not a lot of people that are doing things that are really cool. And so just like the art and stuff is really cool. It's an angle that you don't see a lot of people take to like be edgy and cool and like, but it's awesome. So let's go next to the conference, right? We just saw each other, I don't know, what is it, 2 months ago at the conference in Orlando. What's going on with that? What's the history of that? What's the future of that?
So we do at least 2 events a year, sometimes 3. So the big one we do is CBRNE Convergence, which is always either the last week of October or the first week of November, depending on where the sort of split lies. And that tends to, a bit like the magazine, bring together a number of different disciplines that nowadays are seeing themselves need to innovate. So when we first started off, it was very much about that whole drive from EOD moving into the CBRN space or vice versa. And then we've sort of looked at, again, moving sort of, paramedics, EMTs into sort of roving terrorist threat areas. So we've looked at the challenges behind that. So we always try and look at this concept of convergence. So again, because of outside situations, we've been looking more at that sort of challenge from sort of hazmat and CBRN troops into a kinetic environment like we're seeing in the Ukraine. So that's the current flavor of where it is, and where we might be in 5 to 10 years time. I'm not entirely sure. So we look at good stories. As you said, we travel around the world a lot. So sometimes we find an individual who's just got so many sort of good war stories. So there's a friend of mine, Gareth Roberts, who works for South Wales Police, and South Wales is like the Florida of the UK. We get all the crazies through there. They're always trying to do something that they shouldn't be. So Gareth's got all these incredible sort of stories about challenges, innovative solutions he'd had to get to sort of crazy situations. So Gareth will do a workshop on that. So we'll get sort of about 500 people together for 3 days, and just sort of sit down and really sort of chew through what's going on in CBRN. So yeah, next year's Charleston. So looking forward to that. Charleston, South Carolina. When I say South Carolina, everyone goes, "Oh, thank God! I thought you meant West Virginia." Sorry, West Virginia. I don't know anything about you, but a lot of your countrymen don't like it. So looking forward to Charleston. There's some good people down there.
Yeah, I've heard. I've never been, but I've heard it's beautiful. So I'm excited. Hopefully, I'll make my way down there again. So as we kind of look to start wrapping up, I want to ask you a little bit more about your motivations. Right? I think that the story you tell kind of guides this thing that I needed a job doing interviews or research or journalism, and then I fell into this place and fell into this place. But at some point along the line, you really decided to have this be your thing. And so the question is really why on a deeper level? Why not just because you happen to be in this room and that room and you fell into it, but at some point you had to have said, this is worthwhile. And I'd be interested to know why.
So some of it is down to that CBRN hazmat community is a great community, and I really do mean that. Whenever I go to the IFC show in Baltimore, it is just like a massive hug. It's like a giant extended family. You see people like sort of Rick Edinger or Glenn Runners, I'm not seeing you for the year, and you're all really excited, and they're very keen, to be able to sort of to tell you things. And when I sort of came from, whether it's sort of fast jets or armored fighting vehicles, they weren't like that. There were a lot of douchebags in there. So you suddenly sort of shift to something like this, and yes, as you said before, there's a lot of gatekeepers out there, but there's also a lot of people who are happy to show you where you can slip through the picket fence, and you just never stop learning with this field. That there's so much going on. I mean, I know that everybody says that their field is constantly changing and evolving, but I mean, I was at the Defense Threat Reduction Agency event last week, trying desperately to be able to learn about quantum CBRN, which will be the coming thing in sort of 10 to 20 years. And again, it just sort of blew my mind in terms, properly blew my mind of, I really don't understand this and I need to get to grips with it. So good news, I got about 10 years to do so. But, you know, and it's just always pushing you. Never, I mean, all right, there's a certain amount of, yeah, I've seen that before, but there's always new stuff that's happening. There's always people doing new things. You go, that's so cool. How did you sort of think of that? There's a guy called Dr. Mike Kaminsky at Argonne National Lab who, you know, clearly was having a coffee somewhere and saw some street sweepers going by and went, can we use that for, you know, remediation of radiological sort of particles? And you go, nobody ever did a tactical, you know, rad street sweeper. But now there's somebody out there thinking about it, and there's cool ideas, and there's, you know, lovely people, some douchebags, but a lot of lovely people out there, and you just go, why would I want to do something else? Why wouldn't I want to do this?
Absolutely. So tell the people listening where they can find the magazine, where they can get in, where they can find more information about the conferences.
Yeah, so if they go along to CBRNEworld.com, there's a small registration form out there that'll take about 5 minutes to be able to fill in. That will get you a free subscription to the online version. There's 20 years of magazines there. They can sort of fill their boots, terabytes of data on anything you might need to know on CBRNE Hazmat. And then if they want to be able to sort of get the hard copy, or they want some of the other sort of information services that we provide, there's a tariff there for them as well. We'd love to see them in Charleston next year.
Absolutely, yeah. And so I can't overemphasize to the audience, if you have the opportunity to spend any bit of time with this guy, he is a riot. I don't know if I've laughed so hard in my life as the times I've spent with him, but he is just a treat, and I'm super grateful for the work you're doing, and I'm super hopeful that I'm going to see you again soon.
Yeah, and keep asking questions, Jake. It's a good thing to do.
Thank you. Yeah, I appreciate the time. Thanks for getting on here and talking to me today.
Pleasure.